The sound of a zipper echoed through the quiet bedroom. Jungkook sat on the edge of the bed, carefully packing his suitcase, his fingers hesitating over every folded shirt. He didn't need to look up to know Taehyung was watching him. He could feel it, the thick silence, the way Taehyung's breathing had changed, slower, controlled, as if he were holding himself back. "You're really going?" Taehyung's voice was soft, but there was an unmissable strain beneath it. Jungkook sighed, turning to face him. Taehyung was standing near the window, arms crossed over his chest, his expression unreadable. His dark eyes, however, told a different story. They held a storm, a quiet, brewing anxiety that Jungkook had seen many times before. "You know I have to," Jungkook said gently, standing up and walking toward him. "It's just a week, baby, just a week," Taehyung echoed, but it didn't sound like reassurance. It sounded like a countdown to something unbearable. Jungkook reached out, tracing his fingers along Taehyung's wrist. "I'll call you every night. Video calls, texts, you won't even notice I'm gone." Taehyung let out a hollow laugh. "You say that like I haven't noticed every second you're away before." Jungkook's heart clenched. Taehyung's separation anxiety wasn't just about missing him, it ran deeper than that. It was tangled in past wounds, in unspoken fears of being left behind. Jungkook had seen it in the way Taehyung held onto him a little too tightly at night, in the way he shut down whenever goodbyes were mentioned. "Taehyung," Jungkook whispered, stepping closer. "Tell me what you're thinking." Taehyung closed his eyes for a moment before shaking his head. "It doesn't matter. You already made up your mind. It does matter." Jungkook cupped his face, his thumbs brushing against Taehyung's sharp cheekbones. "I want you to talk to me, for a moment." Taehyung looked like he might. His lips parted, his hands gripping Jungkook's wrists as if grounding himself. But then, he swallowed it back, forcing a small smile instead. "I'm going to miss you, that's all." Jungkook didn't believe him, not entirely. But he knew Taehyung well enough to understand that pushing too hard would only make him retreat further. "I'll be back before you know it," Jungkook promised, pressing a to Taehyung's forehead. "You'll have your friends around, and my family will check on you. You won't be alone." Taehyung nodded, but the way his fingers curled into Jungkook's shirt told another story. He wasn't just scared of being alone. He was scared of being left behind. And Jungkook was scared of what that fear might do to them both. The door clicked shut. The sound was quiet, barely a whisper in the grand apartment, but to Taehyung, it might as well have been a gunshot. He stood frozen in the middle of the living room, staring at the door Jungkook had just walked out of. He could still hear the faint echoes of Jungkook's voice in his ears, soft reassurances, whispered promises of phone calls and quick returns. But none of it settled the sinking feeling in his chest. A week. Just a week. Taehyung exhaled slowly and turned toward the couch, willing himself to move. The room felt too big without Jungkook's presence, too quiet without the usual hum of his voice filling the space. His fingers itched to grab his phone, to text Jungkook before he even reached the car. But he forced himself to resist. He wasn't that weak. He wasn't. Instead, he grabbed the remote and turned on the TV, flipping through channels aimlessly. He wasn't even paying attention to what was on. His mind was stuck in a loop, replaying the moment Jungkook had walked away. He could already feel the old, familiar restlessness settling in. "You always leave." The words weren't from today. They were from years ago, spoken in a voice much younger, much more fragile. Taehyung squeezed his eyes shut, trying to push the memory away, but it clawed its way to the surface anyway. Years ago Taehyung sat on the front steps of his childhood home, his tiny hands gripping the edge of his sweater. His legs swung restlessly as he stared down the empty road, waiting. "Hyung, he's not coming," a small voice said beside him. Taehyung turned to his best friend, Jimin, who was hugging his knees to his chest. Jimin had given up waiting hours ago, but Taehyung still had hope. "He promised," Taehyung whispered. Jimin sighed, his eyes filled with pity. "Your brother always promises." Taehyung flinched. He didn't want to hear that. He didn't want to believe it. Because believing it meant accepting that every time his older brother said, "I'll be back soon," it had never really meant anything. But this time was different. It had to be. So he waited. And waited. Until the sky turned dark. Until his mother came out and gently pulled him inside. Until he could no longer pretend he hadn't been left behind again. Present Taehyung's eyes snapped open. His breathing was shallow, his fingers gripping the blanket on his lap. It wasn't the same. Jungkook wasn't like that. Jungkook would come back. Wouldn't he? His phone buzzed, yanking him out of his spiraling thoughts. His heart leaped as he grabbed it, his hands shaking slightly. "Jungkook, just got to the airport. I missed you already." Taehyung exhaled shakily, pressing the phone to his chest. He shouldn't feel this relieved over a single message. But he did. "Jungkook, I'll call you as soon as I land, okay? I love you." A small smile tugged at Taehyung's lips, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Taehyung, okay. I love you too." But love didn't stop the ache in his chest. And it wouldn't stop the long, empty week ahead. The first night was always the hardest. Taehyung lay in bed, curled up on Jungkook's side, inhaling the faint scent left behind on the pillow. His fingers clenched the fabric, his heart heavy. He hadn't realized how much he had structured his nights around Jungkook's presence until now, until the bed felt too cold, the silence too loud, and the absence unbearable. The nightlight by the bedside cast a dim glow across the room, but it didn't ease the weight pressing down on his chest. He reached for his phone again, unlocking it for what had to be the 10th time in the past hour. No new messages. Of course not. Jungkook's flight was long, and he probably hadn't landed yet. Taehyung had told himself he wouldn't be clingy, that he wouldn't spiral, that he'd be fine. But his body wasn't listening. His chest felt tight, his breathing uneven, and the longer he lay there, the more the memories clawed their way back in. Jungkook had left before. No, not in the way his brother had. Not in a way that meant abandonment. But it didn't change the way it felt. He needed to hear Jungkook's voice. Taehyung stared at his screen for a moment before typing. "Taehyung, have you landed yet?" It was nearly 3 in the morning, but sleep wasn't coming. He lay there, phone clutched in his hand, waiting for the typing bubbles to appear. Minutes passed. Then, "Jungkook, just landed, baby. I was about to text you, Jungkook. Why are you still up?" Taehyung hesitated before replying. Taehyung couldn't sleep. The reply came almost instantly. "Jungkook, I'll call you." Taehyung barely had time to process before his phone vibrated. He answered immediately, pressing the device against his ear. "Hey," Jungkook's voice came through, slightly tired but warm. "You okay?" Taehyung let out a shaky breath, closing his eyes. "Yeah, Jungkook sighed softly, as if he didn't believe him. What's wrong? Taehyung turned onto his side, staring at the empty space beside him. Nothing. I don't like being here alone. A pause. Then, I know, baby. Jungkook's voice was softer now, almost guilty. I wish I could be there. Taehyung bit his lip. Me too. Did you eat? Taehyung hesitated, knowing Jungkook could see through the lie. I wasn't hungry, Taehyung. Jungkook sighed. You promised me you'd take care of yourself while I'm gone. I know, Taehyung whispered. I don't feel like eating when you're not here. The line went quiet for a moment, and Taehyung hated himself for saying it. He didn't want Jungkook to feel bad. He didn't want to be a burden. Jungkook finally spoke, voice soft but firm. I don't like the thought of you going to bed without eating. Will you have something if I stay on the phone with you? Taehyung swallowed. Maybe, not maybe. Yes, Jungkook murmured. Go grab something, baby. Even if it's just a snack. Taehyung didn't move at first, but Jungkook was patient. He stayed on the line, talking softly, coaxing him to get up. Eventually, Taehyung found himself in the kitchen, eating a small bowl of fruit while Jungkook talked about his flight. It wasn't much, but it was something. And when he finally got back into bed, phone still pressed to his ear, Jungkook hummed softly, a low, comforting melody Taehyung had heard many times before. I'll call you again in the morning, Jungkook promised. Okay, Taehyung murmured, his eyes finally growing heavy. Sleep well, love. And for the first time that night, Taehyung breathed a little easier. The morning sun streamed through the curtains, but Taehyung barely noticed. He had slept, thanks to Jungkook's voice lulling him into rest, but the moment he woke up, the emptiness settled back into his chest. Jungkook wasn't there. His first instinct was to check his phone. Jungkook, good morning, love. I hope you slept well. Call me when you wake up. A small smile tugged at Taehyung's lips, but it faded just as quickly. He wanted to hear Jungkook's voice again, but he didn't want to seem too needy. He hesitated for a moment before typing, Taehyung, good morning. I just woke up, Jungkook, perfect timing. Can I call you? Taehyung felt warmth spread through his chest. Taehyung, yeah. Seconds later, his phone vibrated. He answered immediately. Morning, baby. Jungkook's voice was bright, a little teasing. Did you sleep okay? Taehyung hummed, stretching under the blanket. Because of you, Jungkook chuckled. Good. That's my job. Taehyung didn't respond, just closed his eyes and let himself soak in the comfort of Jungkook's voice. What are you doing today? Jungkook asked after a moment. Taehyung exhaled. I don't know. Maybe I'll go see Jimin. Good, Jungkook said, sounding relieved. Don't stay inside all day, okay? Go out, be around people. It'll help. Taehyung nodded even though Jungkook couldn't see him. I will, promised. Taehyung hesitated, then sighed. Promise. Later that afternoon, Taehyung found himself at Jimin's apartment, curled up on the couch with a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Jimin handed him a mug of warm tea and sat down beside him. You look like Jimin said bluntly. Now, Taehyung muttered, taking a sip of his tea. Thanks, Jimin sighed, nudging his shoulder. You know what I mean. You're miserable without him. Taehyung didn't deny it. Instead, he stared at his tea, tracing the rim of the mug with his finger. It's just hard. Jimin's expression softened. I know, Tae. But it's only a week. It doesn't feel like a week, Taehyung murmured. It feels like forever. Jimin didn't respond right away. Then, after a moment, he said, "It's not just about Jungkook leaving, is it?" Taehyung's grip on his mug tightened. "I don't know what you mean," Jimin sighed. "Tae, we've been friends for years. I know how you get when people leave." Taehyung swallowed, looking away. He hated how easily Jimin saw through him. "It's not like that," he tried, but Jimin just raised an eyebrow. Taehyung sighed, running a hand through his hair. I hate being alone. It reminds me of things I don't want to remember." Jimin's gaze softened. "Your brother?" Taehyung stiffened but didn't respond. That was answer enough. Jimin reached out, squeezing his hand. "You know Jungkook isn't like that, right? He's not leaving you." "I know," Taehyung whispered. "I do," but knowing it didn't change the ache in his chest. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Jungkook stared at his phone, brows furrowed. Taehyung had responded to his texts, picked up his calls, and even gone to see Jimin. But something felt off. Taehyung's words were normal, but his voice, his tone, it was distant. Like he was holding something back. Jungkook didn't like it. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. He still had days left on this trip, but already, he was wondering if he should cut it short. Because something in his gut told him that Taehyung wasn't okay. And Jungkook couldn't stand the thought of him hurting alone.